guys and welcome back. This is part 18 of the Suzuki VS1400 teardown. Today I'm going to be showing you how to change those piston rings on the pistons. I'm going to be showing you how to get them on and how to get everything back into the cylinder. Before you get too far into this, you need to make sure that you've got a clamp like this. That is, they clamp the piston rings onto the piston, allowing you to slide the piston back into the cylinder. So make sure you get one of these. They're really cheap, inexpensive tools, great to have in the garage. And mine I think was around 10-12 quid, so I'll leave a link in the description for you if you need to pick one of these up. So my piston rings I bought directly from Suzuki via MSP, Motorcycle Parts EU, and that's why they took so long to get here. You might have heard me mention them in a previous video. It took nearly a month for them to get here, but they're finally here. Let's do it. So if you've bought new rings from Japan, from Suzuki, from wherever it might be, legit Suzuki VS1400 rings, when you open them, you might be a little bit confused about one thing in particular, and that is which ring goes where. And I'm going to walk you through it in a moment, but there is one particular instance that you need to take note of, and that is the two main top rings. They look a little bit like this, and they're the biggest rings that in the box. Now, this old ring, you can see that it's very shiny. It's been chrome plated, and you can see how reflective it is. Now, they only did that originally on the top ring, so that you knew that this was the top ring, because the two rings that sit at the top of the piston, while they might look the same straight out of the packet, they're actually very different, and if you get them mixed up, you're asking for trouble. The one that has a deeper, harsher edge is the second ring, and that would go in position 2 on the piston. I'm going to walk you through that in a moment, but I just wanted to let you know, don't just go into this guns blazing and start installing these rings, because there is a difference between the top and the second ring. The first thing that we're going to want to do, of course, is remove the old rings from the piston. It's important that you put some sort of rag around the base of the piston here. It does a couple of things. Number one, it catches any loose carbon and debris that might be on the rings, and it stops the piston falling back into the engine. These plastic guides here, if you wanted to remove them, you can, but you would need to remove the side casings here for the clutch and then remove the clutch basket. Just try and work around it, be aware of them, and don't break them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start taking off these rings. I'm going to go for the two top rings first. As long as we don't scratch or damage the piston in any way while we're doing it, that is the main thing. Don't go scoring the side of the piston with the edge of these rings, because they are particularly sharp. I'm going to grab myself a long nose set of needle pliers here, like that, long nose needle pliers. Because I'm not going to be using these again, I'm going to use it on these rings, but I'm not going to use these needle pliers on the new rings. But this is just to give me some leverage. I'm going to pull and I'm going to bring that up to the top. Hoping you guys are going to be able to see everything I'm doing here. And I want to remove it, but I don't want to snap it if I can help it. There we go. And just work it free. Don't force it. They are brittle. Come around to the other side, bit of pressure. Maybe if we do a bit of an upward motion and spin it. So I pulled back on the ring then. And then, there we go. Ring number 1 off. Now let's move on to ring number 2. I'm going to try and do the same thing. You might have to bump them up a notch every time you come down a step. If you have to do a step by step, do it. Don't try and force it past its breaking point. Let's pop that up there. Same again. I'm going to come around the edge. Push the back up if we can. Don't want to score anything, so. This one's being particularly difficult. There we are. Ring number 2. Next, we've got 3 different rings in here. We've got 2 rail rings, one at the top, one at the bottom, and then we've got an oil ring in the middle, or a spacer ring. Let's see if we can get the top rail ring first. These are very thin in comparison to the other ones, and they're a lot softer, a lot easier to work with, a lot easier to remove. Putting pressure on the back of the piston where the ring is to push them forward. No, can't get it there with those, and I'm not going to continue because I don't want to scratch the piston. Let's see, there we go. Hope you can see that, it's just popped up there. Like so. And if we rotate it, spin it the other way, pops itself up. Now it's in the top, that's fine. There we go, that's the third ring. Next we've got the oil ring, or the spacer ring. Now this is the only ring in the set that the two parts of it actually meet and bump together. So you want to try and find the split. I think that's it there. Yep, there's the split. Hope you can see that. Now this is something to actually take note of when we install the new one. This ring, this oil ring, the ends need to butt together. They don't. You want to make sure they don't overlap. You want to make sure they bump together. We've got a little bit of leverage at the back here. Just going to come around, feed that off, like so. And we've got our last one at the bottom. Find the end. We should just be able to grab that one by hand. There we go. So that's the old rings removed. I'm just going to give the piston a rub round. Make sure there's no debris in those gaps. No carbon. This is a good chance now to inspect the piston for any other damage, inspect for any dirt that might be lingering inside these crevices here. All looks okay. So a simple way to distinguish the two is that rather than there being chrome plating on the actual ring, on the top of the ring, they've put it on the edge. Whereas the other ring does not have a chrome edge. You see the difference? So we know that this chrome edged ring goes on the top. We can locate the letter T, which would be that way up, and the letter T on the bottom ring would be that way up. So we know that they are supposed to sit in that orientation. Ring number 1 and ring number 2. Okay, so a little bit of engine oil on the piston, just to give us a little bit of movement. We can do the inside of the rings themselves, just put a little glaze of oil on there. Nothing massive, this is just to help us get these rings on without putting too much stress on the rings. Okay. Now going by the workshop manual, it tells us that the first rings that we should install are the oil rings, and that's these ones at the bottom, which would make sense. We don't want to have to be fighting over the two bigger top rings. The first ring that you need to install is the oil ring, this one here. And the reason for that is because it has a backing to it, a flanged backing. And then the two smaller rings, they actually sit on top and below of this ring, up against this back edge here. So it's important that you put this one on first. Take your time with it, be nice and gentle. Pop that on there, nice and easy. Remembering that the ends of that ring bump together. Next we can take either of the two small rings, they're both identical, but it is important that we get one on the underside of the oil ring and one on the top side of the oil ring. So we want to try and get to the bottom first. I'm going to start that one there and work my way around. Oh, that's actually gone to the top, but I've got hold of it on this side, so we should be able to maneuver that down. Okay, well that's gone onto the top. We'll leave that one there. Move on to the next one, a light glaze of Moto oil on it, just to help it along. There we are. And as you move your way around, you'll see that she starts to fit into place. There we go. It's a good idea to spin the ring to sort of make sure everything's in place, which that currently looks like it is. Now we want to locate the letter T for top, which tells us that the ring has to face with the letter T pointing up. We can find it. There it is there on that corner. And I'm just going to try and get it into position number 1, because if I can get it into position 1, there we are. Okay, so right now it's under tension. Okay, part of it is just on position 1, and we should be able to, if we hold this side of the ring, not letting it move, we should be able to move this part of the ring down to position 2, like so. Now we're in position 2. I'm really hoping you guys can see this. Over here, position 1 up here, and we're going to very carefully maneuver it down, putting a little bit of outward pressure on the ring, but not too much. There we go, that's snapped into place at the bottom here. And if I now rotate the ring, it will just pop into place. There we go. So that's the first main ring into position number 2. And now we need the last ring. Again, polished chrome edge. We know that it goes at the top. We'll look for the letter T. It's in that corner there. So we know it faces this way. A little glaze of oil. And let's try this again. Popped in that side, and I am going to rotate the ring ever so slightly, bit of pressure, and I'll try and move it so you guys can see this. If I rotate the ring and put downward pressure on the ring, just a little bit of pressure, it will help it ping into place, like so. And there you go, all your rings are installed. Now the next step to finalise this, don't just go putting the head back on right now. Make sure that you check for any signs of debris, like there's got a little bit of fluff there, you know, anything hard, make sure that you try and get rid of it now. Don't go putting the cylinder straight back on. There's a few things we need to do first. The next step is we need to make sure that each of these rings and their respective gaps, so these sections here, are orientated on the piston in a particular way. If we don't do it, if we ignore this and we put the piston back into the cylinder like so, with all of the gaps aligned, we're going to be allowing oil from the bottom of the engine to pass by the piston and up to the top of the engine, which we really do not want. So now what we need to do is make sure that these ring gaps are positioned correctly as per the manufacturer. Now, we have 3 different locations in which these rings need to be orientated to. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we know where the exhaust outlet or valve for the head would be. And we can tell where that would be by looking at the piston. If you've got a stock piston or a decent third-party piston, it will have a little triangle on it. And this triangle is pointing that way. So we know, orientation-wise, that this centered top here of this piston is where the exhaust would go. And I'll put a schematic up on the screen for you now to understand what I'm saying. So we're currently looking at EX up here, and we're going to call that 12 o'clock. And obviously down at the bottom here we would have the inlet, which we'll classify as 6 o'clock. Let me just get rid of my sausage fingers and get one of these instead. So we have 12 o'clock at this point on the piston, and we have 6 o'clock at the base of the piston here. Now going by the schematic, it tells us that the second ring and the lower side rail rings need to be located at approximately 9:30 to 10 o'clock, which would be about here. And then we have the upper side rail ring located at around 2 o'clock, which would be over here. And then we have the top ring and the spacer ring at 6 o'clock. That equates to 120 degrees in between each set of rings. Okay, so I'm actually going to go with the top ring and the spacer ring first, and that is position 6 o'clock, so down here. So we need the top ring, which is already in place. If we locate that to 6 o'clock, and then the spacer ring or oil ring, which is this one down here in between these two rings, we need to find the center, which is right there, and move it, if you can see, move it to the 6 o'clock position. We have the top ring and the spacer ring located at 6 o'clock. Next I'm going to go with the second ring and the lower side rail ring. So that's the main second ring. I'm going to move the top ring out of the way. Okay, so we've got the main top ring. You want to be careful when you're moving these because you will move the other ones at the same time. Now because we're at 6 o'clock here, we need 120 degrees to the center point of the next ring, the next gap on that ring. So I know I can spin that around. Try not to move anything too much. We'll fine tune everything, but we just want to get everything pretty much in place right now. To about 10 o'clock, and we can measure how many degrees that is. If it's not 120 degrees, we can move it a little bit more. If it's not enough, if it's too much, we can move it back. We also have the lower side rail ring, which is the very last ring, this one on its own. We need to move that one around so that that also is 120 degrees away from the 6 o'clock position, like so. And the last one is the upper side rail. That needs to go 120 degrees from this point of 10 o'clock around to what I would classify as 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. And then we can go around and double check, make sure that everything is still aligned. We can check the degrees between each of those points right now. But as far as I'm concerned, they are now in the correct position and are ready to be reinstalled into the cylinder. Okay guys, so that's it. The process is exactly the same for the rear. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. In the next episode, I'm going to show you what we need to do to the cylinders before we can reinstall them. Don't think that once you've done this, you can just install your cylinders straight away. We need to do something called honing. And if you don't know what honing is, it removes the glaze and shine on the inside of the cylinder so that the new rings are given the opportunity to bed down into the metalwork of the cylinder. If we don't hone down the cylinders, we open ourselves up to the possibility of oil leaks, etc., etc., and oil getting past the pistons. And we definitely don't want to do that having just put new rings in. It's a very simple process, honing. It's not the same as boring. You won't need to take them to anyone to get them done. You can do them yourself, and I will show you how to do that in the next video. For now though guys, if you enjoyed the content, please hit that subscribe button and hit the little bell icon next to it so you'll be notified next time I upload. If you're on Instagram, be sure to head over to Intruder Viking. That's my tag there, and you can follow along with all the photographs and stories that I'm putting up on Instagram. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. All the best.